Most brides spend the moments before their wedding feeling nervous excitement. I spent them staring at a burner phone. My heart not breaking, but clicking into place like a lock. The callous text from my mother wasn't an insult. It was the final piece of data I needed. In the next 117 seconds, from the quiet of my bridal suite, I would become the administrator of my own life by systematically erasing theirs, and they would have absolutely no idea what hit them until it was far too late. The silk of the wedding dress felt heavy and cold against my skin. A stark white fortress in the lavish gold and cream bridal suite. Outside the closed door, the soft, distant murmur of a string quartet was preparing the score for my new life. But I wasn't listening to the music. I was staring at the single vibrating notification on the secure burner phone tucked into the beaded wristlet. I opened the message. It was from Mom, signed off with an emoji of a single disinterested thumbs up. Brittany. We regret to inform you of an unforeseen scheduling conflict with Christine's therapy session. Family first, as always. We won't be attending the ceremony. You can just Venmo us the deposit for the venue back, of course. There was no apology, no pretense of sadness. Just the casual, demanding tone of someone canceling a subscription they hadn't paid for in the first place. The venue deposit they demanded back, it was entirely funded by the overtime I'd worked on the software integration project last winter. Laundered through the shared family account they monitored daily. My heart didn't break. It didn't even skip a beat. It clicked. For 5 years, I had prepared for this exact moment. I had mapped every variable, calculated every probability, and placed the emotional burden of the trigger squarely on them. They failed the loyalty test. They failed the public commitment test. By refusing to attend, they confirmed their prioritization. I was never their daughter. I was merely their resource stream. I looked at the text message one last time, my internal clock resetting to 0. This was the exact catalyst I needed. I reached inside the oversized canvas garment bag, pulling out a slim, customized 11-inch laptop that Jonathan had encrypted for me months ago. My hands, steady and surgical, typed the admin password. The screen glowed green. Project Independence. Status, dormant. Catalyst received. Initiating Phase 1. Financial decommissioning. The velvet quiet of the bridal suite was instantly replaced by the sterile clarity of the screen. I was no longer a woman in a wedding dress. I was an administrator logging into a hostile system. The transition was instantaneous. The plan had moved from the abstract planning stage, dormant, to active execution. Phase 1. My emotional state switched from daughter to administrator. My fingers, trembling slightly from adrenaline but mechanically precise, navigated the complex nested folders of the Project Independence desktop. The 11-inch laptop hummed softly, a co-conspirator in white silk and gold. The protocol was designed to be instantaneous, leaving no digital breadcrumbs that could be traced back until after the public announcement was launched in Phase 2. First, access control revocation. I logged into the primary shared banking portal, the resource pool. For 5 years, my family had treated this account like an open ATM, primarily funded by my salary, savings, and side project bonuses. They had user-level access. I had the root password. The difference was critical. The first step was to change the credentials. The old password, ironically, was FAMI1YF1RST. I deleted it, replacing it with a randomized 64-character encryption key that Jonathan and I had memorized months ago. Both Mom and Christine were instantly locked out. The banking system registered 2 concurrent user session terminations. I felt nothing. No guilt, no sorrow, only the methodical certainty of an administrator executing a scheduled deletion command. Next came the secondary, but more damaging, step. Resource withdrawal. The shared account held the remainder of the funds I had earmarked for them. Funds they believed were their emergency savings, but were in fact my own liquidity being held hostage, ready for this transfer. They expected the system to continue funding their lifestyle. The mortgage minimum, Christine's car payment, and the maintenance costs for the family's premium cable and streaming services. I executed the pre-scheduled bulk transfer, a single seven-figure sum, the culmination of 5 years of strategic saving, working double shifts, and withholding my true financial success from their prying eyes was moved instantly into the encrypted, offshore trust account Jonathan had set up under my legal name. The resource pool was drained, leaving only the minimum necessary balance to cover the checks they had already written that week, delaying immediate panic but guaranteeing an overdraft cascade by Monday. The crucial next move was disabling the exploit vector, the secondary credit cards. Mom and Christine each held a card linked to my premium business line. They used them for everything, arguing that their purchases were family necessities. In reality, they were a monthly audit nightmare I funded under duress, using the bank's mobile application interface on the burner phone. I marked both cards as lost divided by stolen, then permanently terminated them, ensuring no replacement cards would be issued. Asterisk warning. Potential system exploitation detected. Asterisk. I glanced at the screen, a small satisfaction curling in my chest. Christine had just attempted to purchase something online. Probably another designer item, and the transaction had been denied. The system was already rejecting unauthorized resource requests. With the financial infrastructure fully decommissioned, I moved to the final, symbolic step of Phase 1, shutting down the luxury network access. I logged into the utilities portal. I canceled the premium 1000 megabits per second fiber internet connection they demanded for Christine's gaming, the HBO Max subscription they used nightly, and the various other comforts they took for granted. I kept the basic landline open for emergencies, but the fat, reliable pipeline of digital resources was gone. They would be left with a slow, frustrating dial-up world, suddenly forced to confront the true cost of their existence without my continuous subsidy. I closed the laptop with a quiet times thunk. Asterisk. 2:41. Phase 1 completed. Total runtime. 1 minute, 57 seconds. I placed the laptop back into the protective bag. The bride was back. I smoothed the skirt of my gown, adjusted my veil, and checked my reflection. My makeup was perfect, my expression serene. The cold efficiency of the last 2 minutes had completely eradicated the residual anxiety left by Mom's text. I wasn't trapped anymore. The cage had been dismantled from the inside out. The distant string quartet swelled, signaling the final prelude. It was time to walk down the aisle and marry the only person who had ever truly seen me. Not as a resource, but as a partner. The future was pure data, and for the first time in my life, I had full administrative control. The first true taste of that control triggered a phantom ache. The memory of how it all began, 5 years earlier, when I first understood that the relationship I called family was actually a highly sophisticated, multi-generational exploitation system. I had been sitting at the mahogany dining table, beaming. I had just received my promotion to senior software engineer at Omnicorp. I was 23, financially independent since 18, and deeply proud of the 6-figure salary that came with the title. I was naive enough to think they would be proud of times, me, asterisk. Brittany, that is absolutely wonderful news, Mom had said, folding her hands neatly on the pristine tablecloth. She didn't look at me, she looked past me, assessing the new value I represented. Christine, 2 years younger and currently unemployed by choice, a wellness sabbatical, as she called it, was scrolling through a luxury real estate app on her tablet. Dad sat silently at the head of the table, his usual neutral expression confirming his role as the passive node, the silent witness to every transaction. Now that you have this new capacity, Mom continued, the word capacity dripping with calculation, we need to talk about Christine's new apartment. The rent is just too high for us to manage alone. And she absolutely needs to be closer to the central shopping district for her networking opportunities. I blinked. Mom, I've been paying the equivalent of full rent into the mortgage account since I was 18. I support myself entirely. Christine needs to find a job. Mom sighed, a dramatic suffering sound designed to induce maximum guilt. Oh, Brittany. Always so logical. That's what makes you the times strong one asterisk. But we are a family. And Christine, well, Christine is delicate. She needs stability to find her footing. You, on the other hand, you thrive under pressure. We sacrificed everything to make sure you had the tools to be this successful. Now it's time for the return on investment. That phrase, asterisk, return on investment, asterisk, it hit me harder than any physical blow. In that instant, the romanticized veil of family love shattered. I didn't see my mother. I saw a shrewd system admin, performing an asset valuation. My high salary wasn't a personal achievement, it was a high-yield asset to be immediately liquidated to cover the costs of the low-yield asset. Christine and the maintenance costs of the entire system. The house. The premium lifestyle. I realized that every time they called me the responsible one, the strong one, or the smart one, it wasn't praise. It was a designation. It was the license they gave themselves to exploit my labor without remorse. Secure in the knowledge that the strong one was obligated to bear the burdens of the delicate ones, I looked at my father. I tried to catch his eye, searching for the flicker of rebellion or fairness. He was reading the paper, his face a mask of practiced neutrality. His silence was the ultimate betrayal. It confirmed his complicity in the system, accepting the peace that came from allowing his eldest child to be the primary resource funnel. That night, I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I simply nodded, agreeing to cover Christine's exorbitant rent, a decision that cost me nearly $2,000 a month. But in the privacy of my apartment, I opened a new, encrypted document on my old hard drive, the one they didn't know about. I typed the header, asterisk Project Independence asterisk. My goal shifted entirely. I wasn't trying to fix the family, because the family wasn't broken. It was operating exactly as designed. My only viable course of action was to build an impenetrable fortress and escape the operational parameters of the existing system. I stopped viewing my life through the lens of emotional relationships and began seeing it purely as data acquisition and security protocol. I needed time. I needed 5 years to strategically accumulate assets, create segregated accounts, learn the intricacies of asset protection law, and, most crucially, build a new, legitimate social and financial support structure that they couldn't penetrate. I wasn't running away in a panic. I was meticulously engineering a controlled, scheduled shutdown. The wedding date, set 2 years in advance, wasn't just a celebration of love. It was the final trigger condition. I knew their nature. I knew they would prioritize their own needs over my happiness. I knew the public loyalty test would reveal their true metrics. And I calculated that their refusal to attend would provide the perfect, undeniable moral justification for the surgical severance I was planning. The sound of my bridesmaid, Tess, clearing her throat outside the door yanked me back to the present. The reflection staring back was the result of that cold 5-year commitment. The administrator, fully secure, dressed in her victory uniform. I closed the old memory file. No need for further diagnostics. The system had crashed precisely as predicted. Tess knocked softly. Brittany? 5 minutes, sweetheart. Jonathan's already sweating through his tuxedo. I smiled, a genuine smile that felt weightless and free. Jonathan, he was the antithesis of the toxic algorithm I had spent my life dissecting. If my mother's love was a calculated spreadsheet designed for maximum extraction, Jonathan's was an open-source security blanket, reliable, constant, and utterly free of hidden conditions. I had spent 2 years dating him. Carefully, fearfully, running my own internal stress tests before I even dared mention the word project. The moment of truth came 18 months ago, after we finalized the purchase of our first apartment, the physical location for my future fortress. I sat him down in the still empty living room and laid out the entire plan. I showed him the complete log data, the transactions, the emotional manipulation script, the 5-year withdrawal strategy, and the ultimate goal of surgical severance. I watched his face, preparing for the standard human reaction: confusion, disbelief, or the predictable, naive defense of the concept of family. Most people, even well-meaning ones, recoil from such cold, mechanical detachment. Jonathan didn't blink. He looked at the financial log, tracing the flow of my resources used to support Christine's wellness sabbatical and Mom's endless demands. He didn't focus on the seven-figure sum I had aggressively secured. He simply leaned forward, his expression purely analytical, and said, "This exploitation model is unsustainable, Britt. It was designed to deplete you. We need to upgrade the firewall immediately and ensure zero possibility of a backdoor entry." He didn't judge the coldness of my methodology. He validated the necessity of my self-preservation. He spoke my language. From that moment, Jonathan stopped being just my partner and became my co-admin password, the only person granted full, unmonitored access to the core vulnerabilities of my past. He helped me encrypt the trust, structured the legal defenses with his firm's lawyers, and, most importantly, held the emotional line, ensuring that when the system inevitably crashed, I wouldn't succumb to the programming that demanded I try to salvage the wreckage. He also provided the living blueprint for a healthy system. His parents, the Smiths, were downstairs, sitting in the front row, offering genuine, unconditional love, the kind I had only encountered in fictional accounts. They didn't see me as a high-yield asset to be leveraged. They saw me as their son's partner, who needed quiet safety and validation. I picked up the small, personalized locket Jonathan had sent over with Tess this morning. Inside were two tiny, almost invisible micro-engravings. *0 hours times and times admin*. It was his silent affirmation that the 5-year countdown had ended, and the system now belonged entirely to me. I clipped the necklace around my throat. Tess knocked again, this time with a hint of urgency. "Brittany, they're ready for you." I took one final deep breath, pulling the scent of lilies and new silk into my lungs. The adrenaline from Phase 1 had settled into a steady, controlled hum, the feeling of a CPU running perfectly optimized code. I nodded to Tess. "I'm ready." I wasn't walking down an aisle. I was proceeding to the server room, ready to initiate the final, public deletion command. The long corridor outside the bridal suite was a narrow channel of gilded light and silence. As Tess led the way, stepping lightly over the trailing silk, I felt the phantom weight of the identity I had just terminated. The Project Independence Protocol had successfully dismantled the financial structure in Phase 1. But the deepest code, the psychological programming, was harder to overwrite. For 28 years, my operational existence had been tied to a single, corrosive label. Asterisk. The strong one asterisk. That label was their administrative designation, serving as a blanket license for exploitation. Strong meant having an infinite capacity for absorption, guaranteeing that I was the designated emotional and financial solvent for every family crisis. This programming ran deep, and even after the severance was complete, a tiny, residual loop of guilt tried to execute. Asterisk. Shouldn't I call them? Asterisk. Shouldn't I check if they're okay? Asterisk. I crushed the thought instantly. That was the system attempting a self-repair, using my inherent compassion against me. The system nodes, Mom, Christine, and especially Dad, the silent co-conspirator, who chose the peace of non-intervention, had all confirmed their priorities. His quiet, devastating betrayal, accepting the stability that my continuous sacrifice bought him, had provided the final data point years ago. He wasn't choosing sides. He was choosing comfort. By confirming that my function was to solve their problems, not to be his daughter, he cemented my commitment to the scorched earth policy. That's why the wedding date was not chosen arbitrarily. It was the final, public, undeniable loyalty test. I knew their character profile. I calculated the high probability that their self-interest would outweigh their desire to maintain the facade of supportive parents. They failed the test. The text message demanding the venue deposit back my money, leveraged against their supposed emotional investment, was the ultimate quantifiable proof. It wasn't about Christine's session. It was about asserting administrative control one last time. Even as they abandoned the field, they made the choice, cold and clear, recorded in the log file of that final, callous text. I didn't have to defend my actions to myself anymore. I was simply responding to their input. I reached the double doors leading into the courtyard where the ceremony was held. I could hear the string arrangement clearly now. Pachelbel's canon. It was the soundtrack to my liberation. Tess stepped forward, her hand resting reassuringly on my arm. Ready to finally break that glass ceiling, Britt? I smiled. My administrative mask firmly in place. Ready to proceed with deployment, Jonathan. The name, stripped of romantic pretense, signified the highest level of system privilege. The co-administrator. Jonathan wasn't the antithesis of the exploitation script merely because he was kind. He was the antithesis because he refused to treat my life, my time, my energy, my assets as a negotiable resource. Where my biological family saw a high-yield asset to be harvested, Jonathan saw a vulnerable partner requiring fortification. I didn't need to rerun the original stress test we conducted 18 months ago, the conversation where I laid out the entire 5-year exit strategy on a folding card table. That moment had sealed our operational pact, moving us from fiancé and fiancé to admin and co-admin. His response, not pity, but a cold, hard focus on time security vulnerabilities times, had been the definitive validation that my methodology was necessary for self-preservation. The relationship we built was governed by the Times Mutual Security Protocol *, a framework radically opposed to the Times return on investment Times model enforced by my family. ROI demanded my constant input for their consumption. MSP demanded mutual investment in safety, where the only required dividend was shared peace. Jonathan proved this investment was real through tangible sacrifice. The most significant was the necessary delay of our shared future. The small, derelict beach cottage we had already begun saving for. The lawyers insisted that to ensure the financial severance was legally foolproof, every liquid asset, including the beach house down payment, had to be sequestered into the encrypted trust, untouchable by future family litigation. I remember my hesitation, the residual guilt of selfishness attempting one last system override. Jonathan had immediately closed the vulnerability. He signed the papers diverting his own savings into the trust, treating it like a mandatory system integrity upgrade. A beach house is a luxury, Britt. Your complete freedom is the root asset. We invest in freedom first. He spoke of our future not as a fantasy, but as a meticulously planned deployment. Now, standing on the cusp of Phase 2, I felt the quiet, steady hum of his presence, waiting for me in the courtyard. He was the anchor of my new legitimate operating system. And surrounding him were the Smiths, his parents. They were the living blueprint of the healthy system I craved. Their love was unconditional, non-extractive, and entirely free of expectation. They didn't see me as a high-earning asset. They saw a woman rebuilding herself. When I shared the full truth of the financial and emotional abuse with them, they didn't push for reconciliation. They simply helped me grieve the loss of the family I had been programmed to believe in. They understood the duality of my struggle. For my birthday, they had bought me a highly technical guide to advanced data encryption and a volume of contemporary poetry. They validated both parts of me. The cold, calculating administrator who executed the plan, and the woman desperately seeking tenderness and quiet connection. I touched the personalized locket around my throat, the one he had given me this morning. The tiny micro-engraved digits, *0 hours, times and times, admin *. Phase 1 was complete. The money was safe, the accounts terminated, and the exploitative system deaf, dumb, and blind. The wedding wasn't just a ceremony. It was the final public declaration of my independence, secured by the co-admin agreement we were about to sign in front of witnesses. Tess, my maid of honor, knocked softly. Brittany? Ready? I took a final, deep breath, smoothing the silk fortress of my gown. I wasn't walking down an aisle towards a husband. I was proceeding to the server room, ready to initiate the final public deployment of the severance protocol. The air in the narrow corridor was cool, carrying the faint, sweet scent of gardenias from the courtyard outside. I ran a fingertip over the pearl beading on my sleeve, feeling the slight, comforting weight of the burner phone still secured in the beaded wristlet. The 2-minute window of Phase 1 execution was now ancient history. The transaction log was closed, the funds secured, and the exploit vectors permanently terminated. Tess, my maid of honor, and the only biological relative I truly recognized, my sister by choice, stood a few feet away, holding my sprawling bouquet of white peonies. She met my gaze, and her look was a perfect blend of fierce protection and immense, bone-deep relief. She knew the cost of the last 5 years, and she knew the significance of the last 5 minutes. "Breathe, Brit," she mouthed silently, a faint smile playing on her lips. She wasn't telling me to calm down, she was reminding me that I was finally allowed to simply exist, times without calculating the price. Further down the hall, standing by the partially opened service door, was Brian, Jonathan's best friend, and my silent confidant throughout the worst of the Project Independence planning. He was wiping a nervous bead of sweat from his temple, trying to look stoic in his formal wear. Brian was the security detail for my mental health, the only third party who had reviewed the non-financial documents, the 5 years of manipulation script printouts, and told me flatly, "You are not crazy, you are being robbed." He gave me a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. Asterisk status check. All clear. Asterisk I didn't feel the nervous anticipation or the giddy excitement of a typical bride. I felt the deep, profound stillness of having successfully executed a life-altering, high-stakes security breach and surviving intact. The anxiety, which had been a low, persistent hum beneath every thought for 5 years, had vanished completely, replaced by the smooth, controlled efficiency of an optimized central processing unit. The hardest part was already done. The financial severance, the core of the system's dependence, was complete. My fear had been that the residual guilt, the programmed instinct to provide, would override my logic at the last moment. But Mom's callous text, demanding the return of money she hadn't earned, had been the perfect, definitive ethical firewall. It confirmed that the relationship was dead. Only the transaction remained. I glanced down at the locket again. Asterisk, admin, asterisk. I had full operational control. There was a final soft cue from the string quartet, signaling the immediate start of the processional. Tess took my hand, not in sympathy, but in partnership. "They're watching for you," she whispered, referring to the sea of true allies waiting in the courtyard. "Let's go show them what freedom looks like." I inhaled the gardenia scent one last time. This wedding dress wasn't just silk and lace. It was the ceremonial uniform of my graduation from victim to victor. I wasn't walking into a marriage. I was proceeding to the installation of my new, permanent operating system, secured by the co-admin, Jonathan. The doors swung inward with a silent, synchronized grace. The lights spilled out warm and gold. I stepped into the overwhelming beauty of the day. The sun was low, bathing the garden courtyard in a luminous, forgiving gold. As Pachelbel's cannon swelled around me, my eyes scanned the rows of faces turned toward the aisle. They were not faces of obligation, but faces of genuine affection. Colleagues, distant relatives I actually liked, and the wide, beaming smiles of the Smiths, Jonathan's parents, radiating true, unreserved joy. They were the benchmark for genuine human connection, the living antithesis of the transactional system I had just shut down. But I wasn't just looking at the warmth, I was scanning the data points. 2 rows back, conspicuously placed near the aisle, was a single, ornate wooden chair, draped with a heavy white silk ribbon. The chair we had reserved, symbolically, for my immediate family. It was starkly, deliberately empty. For 5 years I had held a sliver of emotional bandwidth open for this possibility, that at the absolute last second, guilt, shame, or even self-preservation would force them to attend, allowing a clumsy, last-ditch attempt at reconciliation. Had they shown up, it would have complicated Phase 1, The emotional justification for the severance might have blurred. Today, however, that empty seat was a perfectly placed monument to their calculated failure. It wasn't a wound of grief, it was a physical testament to the successful termination of the exploit. They were not here because they chose their petty financial demands, and Christine's therapy schedule the convenient excuse over my defining life moment. They failed the loyalty metric. The system logged the data perfectly. Relationship value 0. I reached Jonathan, and the sound of the string quartet faded to a gentle backdrop. The world narrowed to his eyes, blue, steady, and entirely devoid of judgment. His tuxedo, a deep charcoal gray, grounded me. He didn't see the woman who had just executed a cold, precise financial hit on her parents. He saw his partner, securing her future. The moment he took my hands, I felt a deep, seismic shift. The tremor wasn't fear, it was stability. As the officiant began to speak, the ceremony transformed from a public celebration into a private operational affirmation. When we spoke the vows, the words weren't just romantic promises, they were security protocols. I promised to cherish and protect you. I was also swearing to protect the firewall of our shared life, to ensure no external toxic entity could ever breach our defenses again, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer. We had already faced the worst, the calculated risk of my severance plan, and we chose to face the uncertain future together, knowing our foundation was built on honesty, not obligation. When Jonathan slipped the ring onto my finger, it wasn't just a band of gold. It was the final public seal on the Project Independence victory. It confirmed his co-admin status, accepting him as the permanent, irreplaceable anchor of my new, legitimate system. I looked beyond Jonathan, past the officiant, out toward the smiling faces, the energy radiating from Tess, who was dabbing her eyes proudly in the front row, and the quiet, solid approval of the Smiths solidified the new structure. I was surrounded by people who loved me for who I was, not for the resources I could provide. They didn't see me as the strong one to be leveraged. They saw me as Brittany, the woman who had fought her way to freedom and deserved every ounce of this unearned joy. The emotional void left by the deliberately empty chair was not painful, because it was instantly, organically filled by the vibrant love surrounding me. This was the difference between Times Family by Default Times and Times Family by Choice *. The Smiths were my trusted network. Tess and Brian were my operational support team. For the first time, I felt utterly, fundamentally safe, not the precarious safety of an asset being maintained for future use, but the total, sovereign security of an administrator in full control of her own domain. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, Jonathan leaned in, his smile dazzling, and whispered into my ear, "Phase 1 successfully validated, Mrs. Smith. Shall we proceed to deployment?" I laughed. A sound so clear and light it surprised me. It was the sound of a system rebooting perfectly. "Proceeding," I whispered back. The past was deleted. The connection was terminated. The system was clean. The hours following the vows blurred into a sequence of perfect, noise-dampening joy. The cocktail hour, the first dance, the toasts, each moment cemented the reality of my new life. Wrapping me in the warmth of my chosen family, I danced with Jonathan, his hand firm on the small of my back, listening to the high-energy swing band, and felt utterly present. Yet, beneath the veneer of celebration, the administrator was waiting for the perfect operational window. Phase 2. The Times system deletion * required maximum saturation and minimum physical confrontation. It needed to drop when most of my extended social network, and crucially, my family's network, were actively online and vulnerable to information influx prime time on a Saturday night. Around 10 o'clock, after the cake was cut, and the music had shifted to a more chaotic, energetic playlist, I caught Jonathan's eye across the dance floor. I gave him the signal, a quick, almost imperceptible tap on the side of my ear. The deploy signal. He understood instantly. He guided me smoothly through the crowd towards a small, quiet terrace overlooking the grounds, away from the immediate sound of the band. Time to launch the missile, admin, he murmured, his voice low and steady. Time to publish the findings, I corrected, pulling the burner phone from the wristlet. I needed the framing to be clinical. This was not a tirade. It was an audit report. I navigated to the private drafting application where the post had been stored for 3 months, edited and vetted by my lawyers, to ensure it contained only objective, verifiable facts, and redacted emotional language. The title was deliberately antiseptic, * end of service notification, Project Independence Operational Log, 001 to 2023. The body of the post was a point-by-point, 5-year breakdown of the system's exploitation model, ****. Asset valuation, ****. Detail of my annual salary increases versus the percentage diverted to non-essential family expenses, Christine's sabbatical rent, mom's luxury travel, ****, resource distribution failure, ****, a graph showing zero financial contribution from Dad or Christine over the 5-year period, despite their consistent consumption, ****. Emotional exploit script, ****. The recurring use of the terms the strong one and family first, to justify systematic boundary violations and financial demand, ****, termination condition, ****. The text message received at 0:44 hours today, confirming the system's prioritization of resources over relationship, ****, action taken, ****, notification of financial severance, account deletion, and permanent discontinuation of all subsidies, effective immediately. There was no accusation of malice, only the presentation of data. I concluded with a single, clear statement. This log is public documentation confirming the permanent removal of all resource access and the legal severance from the aforementioned parties. My new system is secured and operating under the mutual security protocol established with my husband, Jonathan Smith. I looked at Jonathan, the bright lights of the reception flickering in the background. The music was muffled here, but the bass line vibrated through the glass doors. I felt an immense, clean relief, like shedding a heavy, corrosive skin I hadn't known I was wearing. "Ready to hit the button?" Jonathan asked, his thumb gently stroking the curve of my cheek. 5 years of data collection. It deserves to be processed, I replied. My finger moved to the post button. The digital explosion was silent on the quiet terrace, but instantaneous. I saw the confirmation screen. The post deployed across my primary social channels, shared with nearly 1,000 people, friends, colleagues, and every single person in my mother's and sister's social orbits. For a full 30 seconds, nothing happened. The world remained bathed in golden light and distant music. Then the phone began to hum. It wasn't a gentle vibration, it was a violent, frantic cascade of notifications. The system was reacting. My Instagram feed was blowing up. Comments, shares, messages, the initial shockwave of my public log data hitting the network. People were processing the raw, cold data. Jonathan took the phone gently from my hand, tucking it back into the wristlet. Phase 2 deployed successfully. We do not monitor the system while it crashes, Brit. We dance. He led me back inside, straight onto the dance floor. The band had picked up the tempo. We danced fast, spinning and laughing, completely engulfed by the joyful noise. As I looked out over the crowd of smiling, celebrating faces, I saw only allies. The phone, tucked away in my wristlet, continued its frantic, high-pitched buzz. The sound of a toxic operating system failing spectacularly under the weight of its own exposed data, finally collapsing into chaos while I celebrated my freedom. I was Mrs. Smith now, dancing on the ruins of the past. The data was public, the truth was out, and I had never felt lighter. The next sound I would hear, the inevitable, predictable voicemails from the system trying desperately to repair itself, would confirm my successful severance. But for tonight, there was only the music, Jonathan's touch, and the glorious, unconditional peace of total control. The sound of the high-pitched, buzzing phone was finally muted when Jonathan and I slipped out the side door, into the crisp night air, and settled into the luxury sedan waiting to take us to our secluded honeymoon cottage. The door clicked shut, sealing us off from the joyful noise of the reception and plunging us into clinical silence. "Data retrieval time, admin," Jonathan murmured, reaching for the burner phone. I shook my head, my hand clamping down on the wristlet. "I need to hear it. This is the final diagnostic log. I need to confirm the system response matches the predicted failure parameters." He squeezed my shoulder, his presence a steady anchor in the dark. "As you wish. But remember, this is noise, not information. It's the sound of broken equipment." I powered the phone back on, the screen flashing bright against the shadowed leather interior of the car. Hundreds of notifications flooded the lock screen. DMs from concerned friends, texts from confused extended family, and the ominous cluster of 8 missed calls, all from the same blocked number I recognized instantly as my mother's new VoIP line. I tapped the voicemail icon. The first message began instantly, thick with fury and disbelief. It was Mom. Brittany, I don't know what psychotic episode you are having, but you need to call me immediately. The bank accounts are locked. The credit cards are declined. Christine tried to buy groceries and she was humiliated at the checkout. What in God's name do you think you're doing? You cannot unilaterally terminate our assets. You have 48 hours to reinstate access, or I will involve a lawyer. You committed fraud. I pressed delete without a flicker of emotion. The analysis was simple. Level 1, system response, anger and denial of operational authority. No acknowledgement of the emotional context of the wedding, only the immediate transactional loss. Fraud. She genuinely believed my money was her money. The second message was Christine. Her voice was higher, whiny, and edged with panic. Brittany, oh my God, I literally can't connect to the Wi-Fi. I can't stream anything, and I tried to buy the new Saint Laurent bag I need for the networking luncheon next week. And the card was denied. Denied. Do you know how humiliating that is? You are ruining my life. Fix this now, or I swear I will tell everyone what a fake you are. I leaned my head back against the seat. Christine's log confirmed her primary function. Consumption. Her biggest trauma wasn't the public post, but the loss of high-speed internet and luxury credit access. She reacted like a spoiled child whose favorite toy had been destroyed, not a sister facing the collapse of a relationship. Jonathan reached out and silently took my hand. "Processing well, admin. They are performing exactly to spec." The third voicemail was the one I had been waiting for. "Mom, back again." But the tone had shifted entirely. The anger was replaced by a calculated, toxic cocktail of self-pity and weaponized guilt. The emotional exploit script, too. Her voice was trembling. The sound of suffering manufactured for maximum effect. I saw that appalling post. That hateful, cruel lie times you put on the internet, after everything we sacrificed for you? Everything. Do you know what the neighbors are saying? You've destroyed our reputation. You've embarrassed your poor father. The only reason you succeeded was so you could lift us up, and you deliberately chose to sink us instead. How could you do this to your own blood, Brittany? You are supposed to be the strong one, the good daughter. I hope you know that you will always be alone because no one will ever forgive this level of betrayal. You've times cut us off. You've killed your own family. She dissolved into a theatrical, choking sob, and the recording ended. I felt a profound, satisfying stillness, not sadness, but the cold clarity of confirmation. The word times betrayal times proved my hypothesis. To her, betrayal wasn't my absence. It was the interruption of the resource stream. The family structure, to them, was non-negotiable only as long as I was the infinite funder. Once I ceased providing resources, the entire system collapsed, instantly shifting the blame for its failure onto the escaped asset. "System analysis complete," I told Jonathan. My voice flat. "They are grieving the loss of the resource, not the loss of the relationship. The failure to mention the empty chair at the wedding, or any attempt at personal contact, confirms their prioritization. Jonathan's thumb smoothed the skin on my wrist. No sign of regret for their behavior. No attempt to apologize for the text message. They still view you as the exploiter, not the exploited. That's why you had to burn the bridge, Britt. Any other method would have given them a foothold for renewed manipulation. He took the phone, not to delete the log data, but to secure it. The data is filed, indexed, and locked down for potential legal defense. Now, we leave the operational theater. As the driver smoothly pulled the car onto the main road, heading towards the coast, I leaned into Jonathan, finally allowing the adrenaline to subside. "What about Dad?" I asked quietly, the question laced with the last vestiges of residual pain. I hadn't heard his voice in the logs. Jonathan checked the incoming texts on the phone. "Nothing personal, Britt. Just one short message to my secure line, asking if I knew where you moved the savings account. Because the overdraft fees are going to be astronomical. He didn't ask if you were happy, he asked where the money went." I closed my eyes. It was the final, clean cut. Dad, the silent node, had confirmed his highest priority: financial stability over paternal connection. He wasn't reaching out as a father, but as a system dependent, trying to locate the missing resource pool. "Good," I whispered, the word carrying the weight of 5 years of careful planning. "Then the severance is total." We left the chaos behind, the silent, vibrating phone tucked safely away in Jonathan's pocket, a small, buzzing monument to a system that had finally, and permanently, been decommissioned. I was finally free of the sound of my family's demands. The initial shockwave from the system crash had passed, leaving behind a silence in the car that felt vast and therapeutic. But I knew the actual fallout was just beginning to hit the external environment. The voicemails were merely the high-frequency diagnostic data. The real consequence was the economic and social implosion of the infrastructure I had been forced to support. I analyzed the immediate economic state of the former system. The small buffer I had left in the shared resource pool was already being devoured by overdraft fees caused by their last-minute, pre-severance expenditures, Christine's frivolous spending, and Mom's automated bill payments. By Monday morning, that account would be in a catastrophic state of default, ensuring that every financial institution they used would flag them as high risk. The mortgage was the biggest lever. I had deliberately only paid the minimum required for the next 3 weeks, a timeline Jonathan had established. That gave them enough time to panic, but not enough time to rally and secure a new, viable long-term resource stream before the penalty phase began. They were accustomed to me covering the massive, lump sum, catch-up payments. Now, the system would find itself in a rapid downward spiral toward foreclosure, a direct consequence of their 5 years of financial complacency. Christine's situation was less critical but immediately destabilizing. Without the secondary credit cards, she had no liquidity. She couldn't absorb the shock of having to wait for a paycheck. A paycheck that, critically, she still hadn't bothered to secure. She was the weakest node, and I calculated her reaction would be loud, public, and highly erratic, further damaging the family's social facade. The public post, *end of service notification*, was working exactly as intended, acting as a truth bomb that sterilized the environment before Mom could deploy her usual narrative of martyrdom. My decision to use cold, transactional language, detailing the 5 years of resource transfers, and the financial disparity made it nearly impossible for them to claim they were financially supporting me. The data was irrefutable. The social response, as Jonathan later confirmed, was a predictable, stark bifurcation. My inner circle, the chosen family, Tess, Brian, Jonathan's parents, responded with immediate, powerful validation. They had seen the system in action and recognized the necessity of the purge. They were actively defending the post against the initial wave of blowback. The other side, primarily Mom's church friends and the wider, geographically distant relatives, defaulted to the ancient, toxic programming. But they're your mother, and family is everything. They hadn't seen the log data. They only saw the theatrical suffering of a woman crying on Facebook about being betrayed by her own daughter on her wedding day. But even that defense was weakened by Dad's silent, confirming non-action. He was supposed to be the pillar of moral authority. Yet he hadn't posted a defense, nor had he reached out to me personally with anything other than a demand for account information. His silence spoke volumes louder than Mom's manufactured sobs. It signaled to the fence-sitters that the narrative of simple family grievance was flawed. Crucially, every single step of Times, Project Independence Times, was conducted strictly within the boundaries of legality. I wasn't interested in revenge that could land me in court. I was interested in absolute sovereign control. Jonathan's team had been meticulous. Mom had screamed fraud in her voicemail, but she had no standing. All the primary accounts were legally mine, jointly held with me as the administrator. They were users, and their usage rights were revocable at my discretion. The money was my earned income. Their expectation of access did not constitute ownership. The funds transferred to the offshore trust were secured precisely to guard against any frivolous, retaliatory lawsuit, a move I fully anticipated Mom would attempt out of desperation. She would find that the legal system validates ownership and contractual rights, not emotional entitlement based on biological ties. As the car accelerated onto the highway, the physical distance mirroring the new emotional chasm, I felt a wave of profound, analytical calm. I wasn't just safe, I was legally fortified. The external system had collapsed, and the noise it produced was proof of its defunct status. I had finally achieved the status that truly mattered. Full system sovereignty, legally backed, and emotionally supported. The administrator had won. Now, it was time for the human being to enjoy the dividends of that hard-won peace. The highway became a winding coastal road, the sharp, analytical thoughts of the past hours slowly giving way to the rhythmic, hypnotic wash of the Pacific. When the car finally stopped, the air that rushed in wasn't thick with the residual anxiety of a system crash. It was clean, salt-laced, and deeply cold, carrying the primal steady sound of the waves. Jonathan unlocked the door to the small, wood-paneled cottage, our sanctuary. A slow-burning fire was already built in the stone hearth, throwing soft, forgiving shadows across the rustic living space. Jonathan, anticipating everything, had arranged for the cleaning staff to set the mood before we arrived. I stood just inside the threshold, letting the warmth soak into the heavy silk of the wedding dress. This space, quiet, secure, and entirely ours, was the physical embodiment of the fortress I had spent 5 years building. This was the first place, truly the first Times place, I had ever existed that wasn't monitored, leveraged, or expected to produce a return on investment. Jonathan gently took the heavy wristlet containing the burner phone and placed it high on a shelf, out of sight and, more importantly, out of mind. "Emergency backup status only," he declared, kissing my forehead. "The system is officially offline until Monday morning. You are on mandatory R&R. I felt the last, rigid knots of tension unwind in my shoulders. For 5 years, my body had been a tight wire of readiness, prepared for the next demand, the next emotional attack. Now, for the first time, I felt the exquisite, terrifying luxury of simply existing times without consequence. We changed into soft clothes not for formality, but for comfort. As I sat bundled in a thick blanket by the fire, sipping hot cocoa, I realized how profoundly alien this peace felt. My mother's version of peace was always conditional. The silence that followed my compliance, the calm that settled once the resource demands had been met. It was a temporary truce, not an inherent state. Jonathan, meanwhile, was placing a small basket by the hearth. It wasn't a grand, expensive gift, it was from the Smiths. Inside were 2 mugs, some organic coffee, a bag of artisanal marshmallows, and a note written in his mother's looping, generous hand. Asterisk. "Welcome to your safe harbor, dear ones. We are so immensely proud that you chose peace over duty. We see you, Brittany. Enjoy your beginning." Asterisk. Tears pricked my eyes, not from sadness, but from the shock of genuine validation. They didn't mention the wedding, the dress, or the drama. They focused on the root of the victory, The choice of times, peace over duty, asterisk, they celebrated my self-preservation, not my adherence to tradition. This was the difference between Times family by default times and Times family by choice asterisk. The family I was born into leveraged my identity. The family I chose Times validated Times it. They understood that the entire toxic structure of my childhood was predicated on me fulfilling a role. The strong one. That label had been the administrative designation that justified every exploitation. Jonathan and the Smiths refused to assign me a role. They simply accepted me complex, analytical, and deeply wounded, and provided the support required for recovery. They never ask for anything, do they? I murmured, tracing the edge of the blanket. Jonathan settled beside me, wrapping his arm around my shoulders, only for us to be happy. That's the entire protocol, Britt. Happiness is the only required output. We talked for hours, not about the crashing system we had left behind, but about the future we were building. We discussed the delayed beach cottage, our Times real Times, dream house. Not the bunker apartment and the small garden we would plant. These were simple domestic details. But they held the weight of total control. They were choices I was making, not demands I was fulfilling. I realized that the surgical severance wasn't about revenge, or even just financial recovery. It was the necessary first step to discover who I was when I wasn't obligated to be the strong one. Now, I was just Brittany. Looking out the wide glass window at the furious, churning ocean under the moonlight, I finally understood the profound success of Project Independence. It wasn't the seven-figure sum I had secured. It was the quiet, constant presence of the co-admin beside me, holding the firewall. My mother saw me only as a role. The strong one, the resource stream. Jonathan, Tess, Brian, and the Smiths saw Times me asterisk. They didn't ask me to absorb chaos. They simply allowed me to be free. The vast, turbulent ocean outside was the perfect metaphor. I had sailed away from the wreckage, and on this new shore, I was finally, irrevocably home. The silence in the cottage wasn't merely the absence of sound. It was the cessation of a constant, psychic drainage that had defined my life for nearly 3 decades. For 5 years, I had viewed the relationship with my biological family as a series of operational expenses and security risks. Sitting by the fire, watching the ocean turn from black to deep indigo, I could finally perform the final, philosophical review of Project Independence. It was never about revenge. Revenge is a messy, expensive transaction that keeps the administrator tied to the host system. My goal was far colder, far cleaner. It was about regaining sovereign control over my life, my labor, and my assets. The chaos that ensued back at the main server, the frantic voicemails, the cascading overdrafts, the public humiliation was not my intended output, but merely the predictable, unavoidable side effect of terminating the resource stream to a parasitic host. I didn't destroy them. I simply stopped maintaining the infrastructure that allowed them to be functionally dependent. The pain of the surgical severance was immense, but necessary. Shedding my biological family was like a major organ transplant, where the diseased tissue must be violently removed to save the rest of the body. For 28 years I was encased in a corrosive skin, the role of the strong one, which was merely the operational license they used to justify endless exploitation. That skin, that programming, had to be shed entirely. The brief, intense ache of the separation was the guarantee of a permanent cure. I realized that genuine happiness is not found by fixing a toxic system, it is found by building a new one from scratch, secured by unconditional trust. The love I found with Jonathan, Tess, and the Smiths was not earned by my sacrifice or financed by my salary. It was granted freely. They validated my worth outside of my capacity to produce resources. They saw Brittany the human, not the high-yield asset. The system is now clean, the log data is closed, and if my journey holds any diagnostic value for others trapped in similar relational exploitation models, I offer this final advice. Stop listening to the emotional script. Start collecting your data. Your feelings will lie to you, telling you that your responsibility outweighs your self-preservation, but the transaction logs will not lie. Start tracking every cent you spend, every boundary violated, every emotional demand that drains your capacity. Build your log file. Once you have 5 years of irrefutable data, the emotional argument of family duty collapses under the weight of quantifiable proof. Create your exit plan. Secure your resources first. Find your co-admin, the person who understands and validates the times necessity times of your methodology, and be prepared for the inevitable. When you finally disconnect, they will call you cruel. They will call you selfish. And they will label you the villain. Embrace that label. Because in a broken system, being called the villain simply means you succeeded in escaping their control. It is proof that the administrator has successfully deleted the exploited identity and achieved full system sovereignty. I took Jonathan's hand, the small, soft comfort grounding me to this new reality. The string quartet had faded, the voicemails had been deleted, and the old system was silently collapsing miles away. My future was now a clean slate, a blank terminal screen ready for new, self-authored code.